You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody, the podcast that explores the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch, Eagle, and the greater Boise area. Quick community update. There is a meeting tonight at the Clubhouse regarding the storage facility that is proposed to be going in on 55 and Beacon. This would be a large storage facility, something for boats and RVs and other things as well, and it would take up the corner that exists right now. This just kind of open space that is opposite the gas station, again, on 55 and Beacon. So there is, again, a community meeting at the Clubhouse tonight if you do want to roll down and check it out. I will also be having a rep from the company who wants to develop it on pretty soon so we can ask some questions. So if you don't get a chance to go down to the Clubhouse tonight, or if you're just a community resident and you have questions about it, please do reach out and let me know, and I will be able to ask those questions or address those issues with the individual on the podcast as well. My guest today is a really cool guy. He's actually one of the first cool guys I met when I moved to Idaho, which I really appreciated about him. He has a podcast himself. He has great perspectives on life. He is very much interested in figuring out what makes people successful and how our successes vary. His podcast is called Shaping Success. He is great to talk to. And he also sells blinds, which is how I actually met him originally. So if you're looking for blinds in your home, give him a shout out. But without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Wes Tankersley. All the stuff. I recently got commissioned by this guy who's doing a lab reuse and recycling. Okay. So so say you're a lab. Okay. You have Wes's, I don't know. What's your lab? What do you do?
Hold on, lab like
a lab, like a scientist lab.
Okay.
Like you're in there, you're looking at something with a microscope.
Yeah,
all right?
exactly.
Wes's microscope.
I'm trying to think about my chemistry set.
Like, what would I even do? Like, I'm not a chemist. So you have Wes's chemist set lab, right? And you have this microscope, and you're like, you know what? I'm actually going to trade up and get a better microscope. So you buy yourself a better microscope from wherever you get it. It doesn't really matter. And you you're like, but in case that this new one breaks, I'm going to save this other one on this bench over here. All of a sudden you start developing the storage area that's literally like this precious lab bench area. And it's like piling high with all of this stuff. Now, mind you, you didn't decommission your old microscope properly. So, it still has some slides on it. It's probably dirty. The lens is getting all screwed up.
I'm picturing Dexter right now.
Yeah, pretty. So what he realized as a younger man, his dad was really adept at taking lab equipment and kind of tinkering with it, fixing it and reselling it. And he had this kind of side hustle with it. Well, this guy and his brother's named Ryan. Ryan and his brother are like, we could probably do this a little better. So his dad's like, listen, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go down to the lab. This is like Southern California. He's like, you're going to go down to this lab area. And he's like 22 at the time. It's like, you're going to ask for the lab manager, right? And all you're going to say is, hey, do you have some shit to sell? That's all you're going to say. And Ryan at 22 with no experience is like, okay, I think I could do that. So he goes down to this lab. And he's like, hey, can I talk to your lab manager? And they're like, what? Yeah. Hey, get Steve. So Steve comes out. He's like, yeah, what's going on, man? He's like, hey, do you, and the guy's like, hey, listen, I don't have time for this, whatever. And finally Ryan's like, hey, look, man, do you have some shit you can sell? He was like, what? He's like, I just want to buy some shit from you. He's like, well, what do you want to buy? He's like, I don't know. Do you have any old equipment you want to sell? She's like, well, I mean, I guess I got this fucking thing over here. So he names this machine. I have no idea what the machine is. He's telling me the story. He's like, okay, it's like and then he named some whiskey I don't know. He's like, okay, it's a Ferrari. Do you understand Ferrari? And I was like, yeah. So apparently this guy had this pallet of machines. He had like 5 of these machines on a pallet in the back corner of this lab that were worth like $100,000 each. And the guy was like, or excuse me, not $100,000 total. And the guy was like, how much do you have? He's like, man, I have $2,500. And he was like, well, they're worth more than that. He's like, I'm sure, man. I only have $2,500. Like, what would you sell me? He's like, oh, fuck it. Just take them all. So he sells them the stuff and they fix them up. They have to refurb them, but they make a profit. They're like, oh, snap. And again, they're about 22, 23. And now he's almost 40. He and his brother developed this monstrosity of a lab reuse and redeployment company. So they work with the largest lab companies worldwide. And so we, one of the pieces of content he came up with, he's like, we need to kind of like a unique way of displaying equipment that we get in. And so we came up with a South Park style cartoon where you have these different lab guys and they have these like moving mouths and they have horrible jokes and they go back and forth. But like I come in here and do that. That's my job. It's pretty wild, man.
That's a rough job, right? That sounds really, really harsh.
Oh God, man. I'm just sweating in here all day long. Like, what is the joke for today? Anyway, Wes, thank you for coming. I didn't even give a proper intro. Thank you for being here.
Man, I appreciate it. This is just cool because this is like what I want. Like I'm going to have to get to this point because I love my job. I do it every single day, but it's a job.
Right.
It's not fun, and this looks just freaking fun.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. This is fun. It's not a job, as in I don't really get paid, but
you will.
But we're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. So we were just talking before we went live about how you kind of came to doing your podcast, and it sounds like what most people the path that most people who have obviously a successful podcast means different things to different people,
right.
But it sounds like you took the path of self-expression where you said, look, I want to do this thing. And all of a sudden people had issues with it, on social media or your own marketing platform for your own profession or whatever it is. And finally just say, hey, I just need to have my own podcast.
Yeah.
Back me up a little bit. Walk me through that again.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting because you think about it, like anything that you do, I'm a salesman, right? Like I sell stuff. I sell window coverings to people every single day. People buy from Wes Tankersley. They don't buy from the company I work for. And so that was kind of the whole thing behind it was after I went through those things where they were kind of like, hey, you need to change this, you need to change that. I was like, screw it. I'm just going to market myself because that's what people want. They want to have a relationship with their salesman, and that's what gets you going back to them. So I don't know. I mean, it just kind of morphed into, hey, I'm trying to get business into the show is called Shaping Success, right? So my whole idea about that was that everyone's success has a different shape. I mean, there's no like joke about that. It's you having success is different than what it is to me. Like, it could be going to college and becoming a doctor. It could be going to McDonald's and getting a manager position. It could be whatever that is. And, like I started out just interviewing businesses and then ended up talking to people. Like you, right. This would have never happened had I not walked into your house to sell you some blinds that you didn't buy from me, but that's okay.
Nothing against your blinds.
No,
nothing against your blinds.
That's the thing. But still, we can still have that conversation, right?
Sure.
Like this is the thing. And when we started talking about podcasts and people are just interesting. And that's what I liked about you. It's like, shit, I'm going to get you on mine.
Right.
And so I had you on mine and we had I swear, you're the easiest person to talk to, I feel like, because you kind of think a lot like I do, it seems like, and it's just easy. It's flowing.
Yeah, and I just really want to make a point. I didn't go with anyone. So you had the best bid out of everyone, and we were still like, it's out of my budget. And again, I'm handy, and we figured out, we're like, dude, train wreck. So we get a laser measure. All right, anybody who's trying to do their own blinds, be warned, okay? Because you're like, I could do blinds. It's not that easy, all right? So one of the things that we screwed up on is we got this laser measurer, but the laser measurer, so it's accurate within 1/8 of an inch, okay? Which you think is going to be enough, but you do 1/8 here and 1/8 there, and all of a sudden things get wonky. Plus the interior measurements of the window are not always the same. So it might be 25 1/4 at the top, and it might be 24 3/4 at the bottom. So we lost hundreds of dollars worth of blinds that fit perfectly at the top, but didn't fit at the bottom. And there was like this whole big learning curve, right? So we ended up losing. I mean, we probably would have been better if we just called you back, but
I got nothing to say. Like, honestly, there's no hard feelings because this happens every single day. So I just thought that it was kind of funny that we still, we're still here because the thing is like, even though there was no purchase from me, I still really valued the conversation that we had sitting at your table after I got done bidding out the blinds. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, you don't see, I feel like whether you believe in God or not, or whatever, you get put in situations where you're supposed to be. And I felt like that was kind of one of those deals. Like I'm talking to someone who I could connect with and have a relationship with that's doing the same thing that I am. And now we're sitting here. Right. I'm staring at this studio that you have built, which I'm going to build one now too. And I mean, it's so cool to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And again, it's very hard for people to understand. Like when I met you and you were like, I have a podcast. I'm like, I have a podcast too. And I hadn't started this one, but it's funny to see when somebody aligns with you and then actually follows through.
Right.
All right. So what I mean by that is a lot of people talk about like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Right. And so here you are talking to me. I'm like, oh, I had one back in California. I want to start one here. It's like 99% chance nothing ever comes of it.
Right.
And then you were kind enough to have me on your show, and I really enjoyed the conversation. But, again, it was remote. I'm a huge fan of in person. We can share a drink. We can hang out and just banter.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to drink this good whiskey with you.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Good. Shout out Basil Hayden. So
that's right. You want to sponsor me or Matt? We're good to go. Let's go.
I mean, if anybody, shout out Basil. Just Basil, the rye actually is I hear the really good one. They're
actually they're all really good. I like this one is good. If you haven't ever had the toasted barrel, it's pretty good too.
I haven't.
Basil Hayden's I drink Blanton's is my favorite, but it's expensive and it's hard to find. This is probably the closest thing that you can get to Blanton's in my opinion.
Blanton's.
Yeah.
Blanton's. Well, I'll have to try Blanton's at some point.
That's some good stuff. So when we get my studio done, then you come over and I'll give you some.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the studio, I learned a ton in building the studio, which was, and again, I'd be happy to share all of it with you.
Yeah.
But it's wild what a difference it makes. Because I used to do podcasts in my classroom, and that was fine. It's not that bad, and I didn't have bad echo. The quality was pretty good, but the video was terrible.
Yeah.
So then here I got the video better, but then I was worried about the audio, and there are all kinds of different things. But once you get it just right.
I'm sorry, this is legit.
Yeah.
I mean, I got one camera looking at me here. I got one camera looking at me over here.
We got 5 different mics we're going to align. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there more than...
Well, each of the cameras have mics on them, and then we have mics here, and that's, again, how you merge all the tracks together so you can bounce back and forth seamlessly.
That's so awesome.
Now, do you farm out your production of your podcast? Because I know you record it. You personally record it. And then does somebody else tweak it with the engineering?
So what I do is I use a program called Ecamm, which is a lot like Zoom.
Gotcha.
And I basically have the transitions of what's on there. I'm always tweaking it, but I have the intro. So I basically hit the intro and then it goes to the interview. Then I got to switch between it because mine's all video, but it's a single camera. It's not, I don't have a bunch of cameras going at one time, which that'll be the plan at some point because I actually turned it into a business. I formed the LLC, the Shaping Success Network LLC.
Oh.
And I have a business that is dedicated to it. So I'm selling clothing, I'm selling advertising. The whole idea behind this thing for me for the long term is to turn this into a network where I am having other artists on it. But now sitting in here, I'm feeling like I'm just a little bit behind the ball. I need to get going.
I don't think you are. Talk to me about the Shaping Success, because when we were talking at my table, when we were discussing blinds, the impetus for my podcast back in California, pre-COVID, it was 2020, right? So it was February. I literally launched the month before we all went on lockdown. So I'm well, this is odd.
Right.
But the idea was that at some level, I had to express to the kids I was working with, these 16 and 17-year-olds who were in the chute going to college, I had to express to them how varied and random actual success is. And the irony of the people, especially in Northern California, in the town I lived, very successful, type A people, great, but their path to the success was always so varied, yet they insisted to their children that there was only one way to do it. And it blew me away because it was look, every attorney I spoke with was well, this happened and that happened. Then I kind of found myself in law school at 30, and then I kind of got into it, and now I own this giant firm. You're what? How does that work? And again, all of these different checkered paths led to this universal, at least at that point, metric of success, which is, hey, look, you live in this nice town, and you make a certain amount of money, and I was very fascinated by that. I was how is it that we are so? How is it that we're so blind and unable to shift perspectives?
We're conditioned to think that way. I mean, you think about it I think we're pretty close. I can't remember. We're pretty close to the same age.
Yeah, I turned 40 in March.
Okay, yeah. So I'm 42. So, I turned 42 in December. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of in the same path. And your parents and my parents and that generation, the boomers, right? Mm-hmm. They're well, my dad had to work really hard. He did manual labor, this and that, blah, blah, blah. That's not what he wanted. He wanted me to go to college. I couldn't go to college, so he couldn't quite get there. And then he's you need to go to college to be successful. And that's all there is to it. And I got a scholarship to play football, and it was a partial scholarship, and I was going to go to Southern Oregon University. Got scared because it was, I came from Ontario, Oregon, which is, 30 miles away from here, lived out in the country on 6 acres, go to Southern Oregon University, which is like, I could compare it to San Francisco. This is my thought. Like, so you're from this farm. There's no like kids with piercings. There's no kids with tattoos. There's no gay people.
And now look at you, God.
Yeah. And here I am, I'm walking in there and I'm seeing all this and I'm like, there's two girls holding hands right now. No big deal. Back then it was like,
it's a different thing.
It completely was. It was like, you're scared. This is just like not normal. And, so it was kind of weird. And I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to college. Well, I'm not going there anyway. I'm going to go somewhere else. So I basically jumped in my truck and went down to California, stayed the summer with my grandmother, and then met my wife, who we decided this long distance relationship thing wasn't going to work. So I am a 19-year-old kid, just met the love of my life, and we decided to get married instead.
You dog.
Yeah. So,
okay, and where are you living in California at this point?
So I was in, I lived in Soledad, which is like Central California.
Yeah.
I mean, it is pretty close to where, well, not pretty close, but a
couple
hours away.
So you drive down to California in your truck to hang with Grams.
Yep.
And you meet a girl and you're like, you're the love of my life and we're going to get married.
Yeah.
And you're still married to this woman.
Oh yeah, 22 years.
God, but I love the story. Keep going.
I'm telling you, it's amazing because the way that it worked out was like, okay, so I'm down there. My parents are pissed at me because I'm not going to college. Because I literally took what was in my bedroom, put it in the back of my truck, and left after I registered for Southern Oregon.
Wow.
I registered for all the classes. And all the way back from Southern Oregon, which is like an 8-hour drive from where I grew up, I was like, I'm not going. Not doing that. I've met this girl. She's the one. This is going to happen.
The one.
Yep. So I got there. I told him I wasn't going. My mom freaking flipped out. My dad, he was a pretty stern dude. He didn't really say anything. He just kind of was like, whatever, and you're going to do what you want. And I did. I left. I went back down there and I spent 6 months down there trying to figure out how I was going to go to college and play football at Hartnell College, which is a junior college. But in California, community college is super cheap if you're a resident.
Right. It's not if you're a non-resident, though.
No, it's really expensive. And so they're like, well, we'll help you go to University of Idaho if you come back up here. And I was like, okay. At this point, it was either work at my grandfather's hardware store for $8 an hour the rest of my life, because he was never going to give me a raise more than $8 an hour, or go to college. So my girlfriend and I jumped in my truck, we loaded it back up, and we drove up to Moscow to go to University of Idaho. We get there, I'm moving in with my older brother who's an engineering student up there. And we spend a couple days together. She's got to get on a plane, so we drive her to the airport in Spokane to get her on the plane. And we're just sitting there like, this is going to suck. This is going to suck. This is going to be a long-distance relationship. You're going back down there. And we just looked at each other and we're like, let's get married. That was it, dude. It was like, let's get married.
God, it's so good.
It was great. I mean, you look at it, though, but that's what happened. It was like, we're like, let's get married. This was 22 years ago. And
God, can you imagine? Can you for a second put yourself back in your shoes where it's like the confidence you had? Oh, yeah. It's like a 19, 20-year-old. You're like, we're going to get married. I got this. Dude, we got this, baby. I love you.
It was so weird, though. Like, I mean, I didn't date a lot of girls, but I felt that way about her. Like, I didn't feel that way about all the other ones that I dated. I probably dated 6 or 7 girls in high school. And
that's not a small number. You're a popular guy.
Yeah, well... But, you always find that one, like there was, oh, this one's great, but I want to change this. This one's great, but I want to change this. This one's great, but I want to change this. And you can never change anything. You have to either accept it or move on. And I wasn't willing to accept any of the other ones. And her, it was like, I don't need to accept anything. This is it.
Do you think that's such a bad perspective to have? Like, let me explain. Because again, obviously you engage in long-term relationships with somebody that works the best for you, right? Like, that's just what this is not surprising. But the perspective that you're like, oh, there's nothing about you that I'd change. You're perfect. And then you engage in this long-term relationship where obviously you find out that the person is not, and I'm not trying to bag on your wife or my wife or anything, but like, it's almost like, do you think it would be better if we tempered people's, initial love and kind of lust for each other with like, okay, yeah, look, they're awesome. Yeah, 100%, 99.999% awesome. But there's one thing, and just like be cool with that. Recognize there's
Yeah.
going to be like something that drives you. It's like the movie When Harry Met Sally, right? I think one of the beautiful things that Billy Crystal and that's Meg Ryan, right?
Yep.
Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan had such a great, obviously they had wonderful chemistry and
Yeah.
they had this big, joke, but they hated each other initially and then they became friends. And then it was almost when he goes running through the street at the end of the movie, when it's, New Year's, and he goes running through and Meg Ryan has kind of denied him this, friend zone thing. That was like the original Friend Zone movie, right? Where they'd become friends. She's like, I'm not going to be like you're just person tagging along. And he goes running through the street and he finds her and he's like, I love that you do this, and I love that you do this. And he's listing all the things that drive him nuts about her. But he genuinely loves her, and he goes into this love affair just knowing that she drives him insane. Like the mail in the mailbox, and he checks every single letter. And I thought that was such a prophetic thing for me as a younger person when I saw it, of like, is it really like that? Like you drive each other nuts, but you love each other in spite of that? Because I was very much like you, like, hey, I want to find the person who's, checks every single box, all pros, no cons.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really the best way that I could explain marriage, because obviously there's not very many people who can say they've been married for 22 years anymore. But I think the best way to explain it is that, like, you're talking about checking these boxes, but we make these, what's the word I'm looking for? These compromises, because that's what marriage is. Marriage is a compromise. Right. You don't think the same way that your wife does. I don't think the same way that my wife is. It's being willing to look past the differences and be able to communicate and completely compromise on everything that you do, because that's what it is. I mean, you compromise on parenting. You compromise on what's for dinner. You compromise. I mean, the minute
you just have different views of how the world's going to go in the next 10 minutes, like at every point.
Yep. And my wife is like, when they say opposites attract, I'm pretty sure they're right on that, because my wife is like super loving, super family oriented, super caring about like everything and how if everyone is happy and everyone is comfortable and things like that. And all I care about is that my family is taken care of first. Like, I care about our core. I have to take care of me. I have to take care of her. And then we have to take care of the kids. So if I'm not good and she's not good, then we're not good, because we can't be good for them. And it's just a little different, but it works really well, because she's taught me compassion, because I'm pretty, there's things about me that I'm just like, no, that's not going to work. Like, I'm pretty cut and dry with the way that I look at things. I will listen and I will hear your point of view. And if you can convince me wrong, it's it. But like, there are certain things that just like, no, you're wrong. Like, I'm not afraid to say you're wrong.
Right.
And she'll not want to hurt someone's feelings. And that's kind of the difference between the two. But it works really well.
The not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings is it's like, if you come to the point in your life where you're like, hey, look, I can't make an action that I think is the best action because this person will have their feelings hurt. Of course you have to gauge the severity of the decision, right? If it's like, all right, well, look, I'm not going to order a pepperoni if I'm hanging out with a buddy and he happens to be Jewish and, he's against pork. All right, fine, whatever.
Right.
That's not a big deal. But as you scale up, the longer you wait before you do what's right for you because of someone else's feelings, the greater risk you're at of just absolutely betraying who you are.
Right.
It's like, if you are so easily persuaded based on what someone else thinks of you or of the situation, then like, what is the actual core of you?
Right.
If it's just like, you're like a kite blowing in the wind, whichever way people think you should go.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really have integrity, because at that point you're just wavering whatever way you need to. I mean, you have to be able to stay true to yourself. And if you can't do that, then, and I think that's one of the things that I've always like held pretty true to myself, is that I am who I am. And I'm not going to, I do it in my day job. I do it in everything that I do. It's like, this is the path there. And like, I'm always trying to perfect it. And it's always going to be better every single time. And if it's not, then I have to rethink the situation. But I'm not willing to waver from my my integrity, I guess is the way that I would look at it. It's
sure.
Like, I don't know. I had a hard time today. Like, we were talking about a product that I do not want to sell because I don't like it and I don't think it's a good product. And my boss is like, well, we're going to have to figure out a way for you to sell it.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, right. And there are generally, again, I have a real estate guru guy, one of my mentors from back in the day, and he was telling me all about his first estate. So he sold he sold Heinz products for like 20 years. Okay, so he became this really big salesman, and he was always doing real estate on the side. He was like, I had no plan. My older brother bought a house, so I bought a house. Like I didn't have an idea here. And then the older brother bought a like a rental property, and my buddy Randy's like, well, I guess I'm gonna buy a rental. I don't know. Well, sure, I'll buy a rental. And they're in their 20s and getting jobs, losing jobs.
Right.
And but one of his first sales jobs was selling Juanita silverware. And so his boss comes to him and was like, hey, the sales commission on this is, I don't know, something large, right?
Yeah.
And again, as a 24-year-old, he didn't really have the integrity that you're kind of conveying, which is, okay, well, look, I don't like this Juanita spoon or something, right?
Yeah.
Like he sold all kinds of cutleries to restaurants, so he didn't really care about the brand. He just knew that he was going to make more money if he sold the Juanita one, right? So he was like, man, I became the most raving lunatic fan for Juanita. He was like, I would go into restaurants and say like, hey, look, what do you guys need? I've been talking to a lot of people. They're short on, place setting. Let me do this. Let me go back. I'm going to count them up. I'll do this for you. I want you to assess it because you don't want to be short on these. And like we got some really good product, right?
Yeah.
Just go through this whole shtick doing whatever he could to sell this stuff that somebody told him like, hey, you're going to start selling this aggressively. And he was like, done, I'm your guy.
Right.
And I think that type of salesman mentality that doesn't at least integrate some actual integrity and character leads to very bad behavior. I think we've all experienced bad salesmen. And I've also experienced salesmen who are like, look, I'll be honest, I don't love this product, and this is why, but it does have some upside to it, right? Yeah. But again, these are the drawbacks. If you want a safer product, this is kind of what I go for. But it's like, okay, now I believe, now I trust you because it's not all, sunshine and roses.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, you think about like when I think of a salesman, like I tell people I'm a salesman, they're just like, I think like half the time you see that eye roll, right? Because it's like, oh, great, here we go. Like I had a customer the other day that was like, I want this. Don't even think about trying to sell me anything other than this. This is what I want. And it's just like, okay, cool. That's fine. But you don't have to talk to me that way. You can just say, hey, look, I'm looking for this and I'm going to, and that's what I want.
Right.
Okay, great. You think I'm going to talk you out of... What did he want?
He
wanted some motorized.
Just curious.
He wanted some motorized shades. Don't talk to me about anything else that's not motorized. And I'm sitting there going like, well, if you want motorized, why wouldn't I sell it to you? It's like $450 more per window on top of whatever you want to buy. So
you're like, look, you want one battery or two? Like, I'm not against any of this. Like, I sell motorized equipment. I'm not talking to you about something with a stick you got to pull down.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of like because this is where it really happens all the time as a car salesman, right? Like you walk in there and they're like, oh, we got this deal, blah, 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 best deal on the lot. And then you walk in and you sit down and you're like, okay, we got this extended warranty and we got this package for undercoating and we got this and that and blah, blah, blah. Well, they're always trying to upsell you on something. And then you start thinking, well, this is just some scuzzy salesman who wants to sell me something that I don't need.
Right.
Well, I want to sell you the best quality product that I think that you should buy. Now, you might not be able to afford it, and I have something else that I can sell you if you can't afford that. But these are the best parts of this, and that's why you should buy it.
Right. And at some point, I think people run into it with realtors too. Because again, real estate's my wheelhouse. And again, I'm not a realtor. Let me be really clear. But you run it. I know a lot of realtors and I have lots of friends and I've known them for a long time. And you run into this difficulty where people get so frustrated with, first off, like commissions they're giving realtors. And a good realtor, one of the things I realized a long time ago is, the barrier to entry to being a realtor is very minimal, right? Like you got to go to realtor school. It's like 2 weeks and then you get your certification, you get hired by a brokerage or you start your own brokerage, whatever.
Right.
And you just start going, right? Like you put it out of shingle and go. But a good realtor, so I have this gal, Chris Mitchell, crushes. Okay. I've known Chris for a long time. Her family's in real estate, back in California, and she's doing a really good job here. And Chris checks the boxes that I've always looked for a realtor. It's like, is the realtor making you more money than you're paying them? And she has made, like, I've done several deals with her, and I'll give her express instructions. I'm like, Chris, offer them this or offer them that, because, I'm kind of quarterbacking her because I get antsy when I start doing real estate. And she'll get a hold of me later and she's like, I got them to agree to $15,000 less. I'm like, I didn't ask you. She's like, I just went for it. And I was like, what's the word? And she, again, every time she makes me more money than it costs me to engage her professionally. So it's like, okay, that's a good realtor.
But you think about that though, because she got them to agree to $15,000 less. She made less money.
Right.
But she's still taking care of you. And that was the thing. That's That's what you never see. It's like I could have literally sold this other product that, the markup is more.
Right.
But I don't think it's better.
Right.
And if I don't think it's better, I can't put that in your house and have you call me back and say, hey, you remember when you told me this was better?
Right.
And it wasn't. I can't do it.
Right.
And it's that moral compass that I have. I feel like there's a lot of people who don't have that anymore. And that's the hard part for me, because like I've always been that person who I can't do that. Like I can't rip someone off. Like I want someone to have everything that's good, and if I don't believe in it myself, I can't sell it to you.
Right.
And so that's the hardest part. Any new product that you get, anything that you do.
Right.
It's like if you're not going to add any value, then it's not really worth it.
I actually in my test prep company for like 20 years, right, education. The last 4 years, 3 or 4 years, were the best before COVID hit. And obviously, that was terrible.
Yeah, that was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. And man, talk about a U.S. Just institution, the SAT to get into college, SAT and ACT. These are they're as American as apple pie. They disappeared overnight because all the colleges went test optional over COVID, or test blind. They wouldn't even look at them. And so there was like, it's over. Like, how are you going to you're not going to park that one back in the garage. Like, it's interesting thing. Anyway, side note. So the point is, for the first like 15 years of my test prep, all I did was one-on-one. I'd never hired anyone. I believe in education. I like teaching people. And I always believe is like one-on-one has to be the absolute best product because I can give the student the most attention.
Right.
And I was booked up for like a year in advance. So I was missing all these clients towards the end, all these people that I really enjoyed working with. I was like, I can't, I'm booked up. They're like, but we're 6 months out. I'm like, sorry. So I start a small group. And the small group took off. It completely consumed me. I had no idea all of the benefits of the small group because all of a sudden you had this dynamic, you had this camaraderie. I would bring in snacks. I had to have my own location, obviously. I couldn't go to in-houses. So I got to make my classroom whatever I wanted. So it was super fun. And we'd have like Fortnite parties and stuff. And I agree with you to a point where it's like, look, I only want to offer the best. But I've realized that really taught me at like 35. I'm like, listen, how do you know what's always best? Like, maybe you're wrong, right? Like, you've been so staunchly insistent on doing only one-on-one prep. You could have been doing groups this whole time. The kids love it. That's when I got my merch line. I was giving these kids, hundreds of hoodies and hats and sweats, and everyone loved it. It's like, you have to temper, and I'm not saying prescriptive to you, but for me, I'm so cautious now with wondering if I actually know what's best at every point. Or do I just know what I think is best?
Right.
Like how deep down the rabbit hole of alternatives do I have to go before I have an informed opinion? And I'm really like worried about that now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of eye-opening to have that conversation like we talked about. Like that makes me think of all these things that the conversation we had today with this manufacturer is telling us this and that because we've used the same one for so long and now all of a sudden they're gone. They've sold their business and now we have to figure out how we're going to use this new manufacturer who doesn't do things the same way, which doesn't make any sense to me. And, maybe I am wrong. Maybe someone will like what they have, but to me, it's just ugly. It's like, and I don't know. I mean, that's the hard part is like being able to see that. And I think that you're right. I think we get stuck in that. And this is like an epiphany moment right now because I feel like we get stuck in that, right? This is the only way to do something. This is what's worked best. And then all of a sudden you find something that works better. You have to be open to that thought.
Right.
With everything.
Or try this one. My wife very kindly got me this touchscreen HP laptop years ago. Right. She got it for me for my birthday. And it was one of those times when she was like, hey, I want to get you a laptop for your birthday. I think you're really going to like it. And I was playing I was playing like StarCraft 2 or something at the time. I used to play video games a lot with my brother. And, when I was like 33, he's like, hey, why don't we get StarCraft and, rock some video games? I was like, hell yeah, man, let's do this. So she's like, I want to get you this computer to play. She said, do you want the better video card or do you want the touchscreen? I was like, oh, video card for sure. She's like, oh, man, I think you're going to really like the touchscreen. I'm like, yeah, the video card. And you're like, I think, but the touchscreen's really cool. I'm like, video card? She's like, well, the touchscreen's coming. Like, damn it, man.
Damn it, I already did it.
Yeah, so it always bothered me because not the exchange, but the touchscreen thing was just always weird. I'm like, I don't want to touch the screen. Like, this is not something that I really want. And then I end up getting a iPad for my classroom, and I end up, working with the iPad a bunch. And then years later, I came back to the iPad, and all of a sudden I start smashing the screen, or excuse me, I come back to the laptop. I'm like, oh, it is cool. Yeah. Right? Like, I just didn't want it in that moment because it wasn't the thing. It wasn't the way I was used to functioning.
Right.
But in retrospect, it actually is a really good product because I don't have to my hands like going to the trackpad. I'm going over to a mouse. It's interesting how much of what your preferences aren't actually what's best. They're just what you do.
Yeah.
And you will defend them vehemently. You're like, no, this is not better. But by better, you really just mean this is what I normally do.
Right.
It has nothing to do with what's best.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an arrogant prick I was. God, man.
I think we're all that way, though. Like, too. I mean, that's. I love this. This is great because it makes me think. I mean, I don't know if I'm changing my mind about the product, but I still think that now I'm thinking a little bit more about it. Like it. That's the problem. I think we get so stuck, and there's all these people who think that this is it, and so preaching that, as you're having this conversation right now, just kind of makes me think. Are you right?
Right. Or right, is there any can we just start small? Is there any circumstance where this may actually be better? Right. And if you can find one, if you're like, okay, in this set of parameters, like this is a better product or this is a better means of manufacturing for this circumstance, you're like, okay, at least there's one. I know there's one. And maybe there's two. And then you can add that just to your arsenal of assessment, which is, okay, this is right. Like I was speaking with a CPA a couple years ago. He's like, listen, filing taxes separately when you're married instead of filing jointly, he was like, it almost never works. I do have one situation where it worked, but it almost never worked. And I was like, okay, I actually appreciated that way more than him saying there's no point to ever do it, because then I felt like, well, maybe you just don't understand it enough, right? Maybe you're set in your own way of, man, I got totally screwed by that accountant, by the way. Anyway, I got a new one. Yeah, it was, that was not a great situation. But, be that as it may, what do you think about you guys are building on 3 acres, right?
Yep.
Okay. What do you think about the housing market in the area right now? Because I'm like agnostic. Like in that I do not in the least think that this area is actually in any long-term trouble. I think other areas absolutely are, other states and whatnot. But this area, I was like, dude, this is such a wonderful spot. And, again, it sounds like you're kind of building your dream house.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've lived here a long time. I've lived here over 30, how old am I? 42, I think about 32 years I've lived here, I was born in California, just like you were, and but we moved up here, and this is just a great place to be. Starting to see the market the way that it is, though, it's like, it's nuts. It is crazy. It's never been this way before. So it's really hard for people who are native here to be able to buy a house anymore, because the house that I had, 10 years ago was $117,000 for a 1,600 square foot house is now a $450,000 house. So I wish I would have kept that as a rental. But I
wait, $116,000 for a 1,600 square foot spot.
Yeah, it's like $450,000 house now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was 10 years ago?
Yep.
Man, it almost doesn't compute with me. It's like, where did you get the lumber? How did you even get lumber?
Dude, this place it's a utopia. I mean, that's why so many people are coming here, because it was like, I feel like you probably came right on the tail end of it. Like, you probably bought at the highest it was. But it was gradually going up, because, I mean, our house that I sold that $116,000 house for $250,000.
Wow.
Bought another house for $324,000, and then 2 years later sold it for $6,000. So, I mean, it's just amazing how fast it's blown up, but I don't see it going back down. Like, I mean, you may lose $30,000, $40,000 right now, but in the long run, it's just going to go up. I mean, that's how the housing market is. So it doesn't really scare me to buy something. Interest rates are high right now, but you know what my interest rate is on the house that I'm renting right now?
What?
100%.
I remember that.
Right?
I remember that line. My interest rate's 100%.
It is.
Well, unfortunately, it's not tax deductible, so it's not your interest rate.
No,
it's worse than that.
It is.
It's literally like the interest rate on rent, if you're in the 30% tax bracket, is like 130%.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's more than 100.
Yeah, because you have to use after-tax dollars, and at least if you were paying all interest on a house.
Yeah.
So something you said, I think, is, first off, to your point, I I think the market's actually gotten stronger. And let me explain this. Even though prices are coming down, that's only one metric of gauging market strength. Okay, so say somebody wants to buy a $500,000 house at 3% interest. Okay, and that's like a $2,000 mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. Now that $500,000 house has dropped down, let's say, to $450. Okay, because the person purchasing it at $450 has to pay 7%. Okay, so they're like, well, I'm not paying $500. I'm only paying $450. Fine, that makes sense to everyone. Most people look at that and say, okay, well, that's a 10% drop in market strength, right? Like you went from 500 to 450. But what they're failing to realize is the initial person who bought it at 500 at 3% had, let's say, a $2,000 mortgage. Now the person who bought it at 450 for 7% is paying a $3,000 mortgage. So you literally have a $2,000 mortgage up to $3,000. And that's how much somebody's willing to pay on a monthly basis for that house. Well, by that metric, the market strength went up 50%.
Yeah.
So even though the sales price went down, this sales price is just a piece that factors into how much it will cost somebody to own on a monthly basis. So the sales price doesn't come down in general because people don't have the extra down payment. Right. The sales price comes down because of how much it costs on a monthly basis to own the house. And by that metric, we have continued to march up.
Right.
So even from April, when things really started to turn as interest rates were climbing up, even April till now, you have seen a strengthening of the market, right? Yeah. So when interest rates do come back down, and I very much believe they will.
Oh, they will.
When interest rates do come back down, that $2,000 to $3,000 monthly payment mark, that's going to hold strong. Like the $3,000 is what somebody will pay on a monthly basis, and that will buy them more and more and more house.
Yeah.
Excuse me, in the coming months. So that's it's a big one. But again, that was a sidebar. You said utopia, all right. And that, like, the cackles, like, I was like, oh no, because I think people think of utopia as like Oregon's a utopia or San Francisco. It's like everybody's free to do what they want. Have you ever found it odd here that utopia means you have very strict rules? And I'm not saying unnecessarily strict. But for instance, like you can smoke all the pot you want in San Francisco. Be a huge pothead. You buy it at the corner store. You do whatever you want. Here, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And look at the utopia San Francisco is compared to here, right?
Well, it just depends on what you think is a utopia. Because
I don't think anybody thinks San Francisco is utopia. I think they're just making the lie. I think people are participating in the lie.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, okay, so I'm going to walk into a place where I love the San Francisco Giants. I'm a huge baseball fan. The Giants are my favorite baseball team, but I roll down there and I see I'm staying at the Hilton that I've got to walk 2 miles down there, and I'm having to walk past 5 or 6 different bums on the side of the road. Hypodermic needles on the side.
Block, yeah. Needles everywhere.
People taking dumps on the side of the road. Like, don't they have an app that tells you where they have pooped so that...
Yes.
Yeah, it's called...
There's an app for that.
It's called Chat or something like that. It's like
human feces on the ground.
How can you be happy with that? How can you think that that's a good thing?
You're just not very compassionate, Wes. That's the problem. If you understood, what it's like for this person, then you would be cool with the feces.
Yeah. I mean, I was watching a video the other day of someone, I don't know if it was on YouTube or where it was, but there was a bum in San Francisco talking about why would he go to work when he gets paid $500 to be homeless. And then he gets a free cell phone that has Netflix on it that he can watch Netflix. And then he had 2 kids walk up to him and ask him if they knew where they could find some Oxy. And he told them, no. How much money do you have? And they said, well, we have $40. He said, give me your $40. And then I went and got them fentanyl. And I showed them how to use it. And I told them how to resuscitate themselves because something is going to happen. And that's an education.
Wait, you saw this on TV?
This was an actual person talking to a reporter about what he was doing to help other people. And I'm just sitting there going, thank God I am not there.
Right, dude,
how could you think that that's okay?
Oh God. And people don't, Schellenberger, this guy running for governor in California, he will not win because he's not, Gavin Newsom.
Right.
But he's running on this platform. Do you remember when governors used to run on like, oh, well, we'll clean up or city council people would be like, we'll clean up the dog poop, we'll increase public parking, we'll try to deal with the homeless problem, but like we gotta. Now it's like, hey, there are open drug scenes where crime is rampant, and I'm not just talking drug crime, like crime in general is rampant, and we are literally justifying it under the guise of compassion and social justice. Right. It's like there's no social justice for those people. Like society is failing them distinctly.
Right.
And allowing them to exist like this is not helping anything. And you're right, the amount of resources, I think it's like California allots something like $100,000 per homeless person annually. Like, to do what? Like, do they have, like, Steve just follows around this homeless guy all day long? But it's like different organizations. So California funds a slew of organizations that don't communicate with each other. No. So a homeless person or a drug person or whoever, somebody on the street could be registered in like 12 different agencies, getting benefits from all these different agencies. They might have an apartment in Southern California, apartment in Northern California. They move seasonally. Just like all of these different things. And it's like, no one is tracking this. And this is what Schellenberger is talking about. It's like, this is an absolute travesty. It's inhumane, and it's an incredible waste of money, political capital, everything.
Well, and that's why when you say, like, what do you think? Like, there's a lot of rules here, right? Okay. So what's the opposite of that? You want to see what the opposite of that? You see what the opposite is that. That's why so many people are moving here, because they don't like not having rules. Like, there's got to be some sort of happy medium. And that's what I love about Idaho, is that if I want to go get a permit to carry a gun, I can do that. If I want to make sure that my kid is in a safe place, they're there. Like, I'm not saying that things don't happen here, right?
Sure.
But they happen far less because of certain things like that.
Right.
You know, and that's what people are coming here for, because they feel safe here. They don't feel safe when there's someone sitting there. You know, police can't do their job. Like, I don't know how many times I've been in houses where there are retired police officers that are moving here, and I was talking to one right before the Super Bowl, and he was in the LA County Police Department, and he was telling me that he was supposed to go back down there and work the Super Bowl, but he was moving, and there was no way that he was going to do it because they can't do anything. They're just there. They're just standing by, and if they do anything, they're recording someone, and someone's recording them, and if they do something wrong,
bad.
You
don't even have to do something bad. It's just the perspective.
Yes, exactly.
Like cut out the first 10 minutes where I'm getting attacked, and then give 10 seconds where I hit somebody back.
Yes.
And it's over.
Yep. And that's the problem. It's like, I love the armed forces. I wasn't in them, and I think police officers are there to help us, and I think there's all these people that are here to help us, and like all we're doing is telling them that they're terrible because we base it on the decision of one thing. And the media is trash because all they do is show you that one thing. They show you what they want you to see, but they don't, like you just said, you see the bad part, you don't see what happened before that.
Right.
Because cops are bad. Let's defund the police. All right, so how's that working for you?
How's that? So I have a family member, excuse me, in the Berkeley Police Department, and they defunded it by 50%. And the two of the big, I was talking to Sheriff Clifford about this on a previous episode. But what they did is they said, all right, look, we're going to make traffic stops and domestic disputes essentially like civilian tasks. So they have like a social worker. So you get domestic dispute. There's a issue going on. You don't send in the cops, right? Because these are people in crisis. You don't send in a gun. You send in somebody with like a whistle and a hat and a clipboard or something. And what's horrible about it, I was talking to my brother-in-law about it, and then Sheriff Clifford. It's like what the average person doesn't understand is to get somebody in a headspace where they're going to start beating up their wife or their husband or their kid, and they're screaming bloody murder, and somebody calls 911 because like windows are breaking and insanity. That person is so far beyond a 10. They're like at 1,000. They are just seeing red, and it's insane because they are turned on the people that are close to them, and they're going kaplooey, right? And you have no idea what you're walking into. You're walking into a house that has existing engaged violence. And he's like, these are the most difficult and dangerous calls. Same with traffic stop, right? Like, you don't know who you're pulling over. You don't know. It's like the tinted windows of, again, my family member's like, look, you pull over somebody, they have these massive tinted windows, dropped car. It's like 1 a.m. They're in a bad part of town. He's like, this could be it. You have no idea what you're going to get when you walk up to that. And they made these made these civilian tasks. They were even promoting the idea that you should have civilians doing traffic stops. So if you see somebody running a red light or blowing through a stop sign, you can pull them over. It's like, are you insane?
Yeah.
We're like, what right-minded individual would attempt to pull over another car? And by the way, what right-minded individual would stop? Like if somebody in an unmarked car tries to get me to pull over and they're acting all crazy, I'll drive straight to the police department. Like I'm not stopping for anyone because what do I get robbed?
This is a citizen's arrest.
Oh my God. I made a citizen's arrest.
Did you really?
Yeah. I was 17. I was arguing with my girlfriend. This crazy, she wasn't crazy. We weren't well together. I shouldn't be rude. Anyway, this girl, we're having this heated argument in my driveway, right? I grew up in Concord and arguing with her. We got back and broke up together no fewer than a dozen times a week. Anyway, so we're having one of those breakups. And I notice these people are walking down my street. And then like I see my neighbor's minivan light turn on and then it turns off. I'm like, why'd that light turn on? I get out and I'm already teed up because I'm arguing with my crazy girlfriend. And I run across the street. There are these three guys. And I could tell I was like, what's up, guys? What are you doing here? And they're like, oh, nothing but... Turns out, two of them, they all take off. We call the cops, right? Because I know they went into the car, chase them down. I detain one of them. I'm 17, right? And these guys are like 19. Two of them jump over this retaining wall.
You people don't know that he's a crazy wrestler, so he probably wrestled him to the ground and pinned him.
I was a little bigger than this guy, so I was like, and again, I was at like a 12. I was so nuts at this point because I was. Anyway, cops come. I find them. He did actually steal a purse, and he stashed it on top of an RV. So I find the purse. I detain the subject. I sign this paper, and it was a citizen's arrest, and he went to jail.
That's awesome.
I felt like I did my part.
I think that's the first time I've ever actually met someone who's actually done that.
Yeah, it's. I wouldn't recommend it. What was I thinking?
It used to be on all the TV shows, right? Like, this is what you do.
Oh my God, I'm making a citizen's arrest.
Yep.
And now it's just the domain of the Karens. But it is what it is.
Yes.
Like, you did something terrible. So, back to the Utopia thing. I think I actually heard it's not a sermon. What do Catholic priests deliver?
It's not a sermon?
I don't think it's a sermon. I thought Baptists delivered sermons, or like priests. I don't know. And then like there's a rector. I don't know. The rector's like a Episcopalian guy.
We always just called it like the word.
The word.
The pastor is delivering the word.
Listen, I listened to this priest say these things. I'm not 100% sure what, but he had a very interesting take on it that I had actually arrived at earlier. And he was like, look, you take kids out onto a basketball court. You give them basketball. You're like, you are free. You are free to do whatever it is. And he's like, the kids will play with a basketball for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But if they don't know how to play basketball, then they have a basketball, they have a basket, they have a court, and they lose interest and they wander away. Right. He's like, but if you give them a structure, if you give them rules, you give them a set of guidelines by which they have to obey, they are now going to play basketball. And they will be bad initially, but they will improve within the structure of that rule set, and it will become engaging and fair and enjoyable.
Right.
In the absence of my wife, you ever fight with your wife over toothpaste? It's like the toothpaste bottle gets like empty, like you're breaking your thumb, ramming the last little tiny bit.
No, I never have that problem, but I could see it happening.
Well, you're a grown-up. I'm not. So my point is, like my wife and I go through these heated battles of toothpaste, and I was like, I will literally cut open the toothpaste container to not replace it.
That's a little anal.
Listen to me, it's fantastic. And there's toothpaste literally 2 feet behind me. I'm like, not tonight, son. Anyway, so I realized,
there,
1,000%. Like I cut it up and the whole thing. So I have this. We're in this toothpaste war, and at one point I'm like, you know what I should do? I should just I have like a travel toiletry little thing, right? I was like, I'm just going to use some out of there. And as I'm grabbing it to do it, I realized I was like, once you go down this road, there's no going back. Because once you start cheating, first off, the fun you're going to have is over because you're cheating.
Right.
Right? Like you're only having fun because you're both observing this very strict code of morality, which is like, thou shalt not use any toothpaste outside of this tube, right? And whoever breaks first is the loser. But it's so like, that's the fun, right? In the absence of that rule, if I start cheating, it's not even fun. And I think that's the mistake people come to with the idea of utopia.
Yeah.
It's like utopia is not everybody does what everybody wants at any point, right? Utopia for me is more excelling within a very specific set of rules and having a good time doing that with those among you, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's like moving the goalpost, right? Like, okay, so this person can't do that, so let's go ahead and just move. Let's change the place of where we have to score the goal, right?
Right.
It's ridiculous because you continue to do that, and then what's next? What more are you going to take? How much more are you going to take of that?
Right.
You know.
Did you end up finishing college in Idaho?
No, I did not. Well,
Talk to me. So
I
you guys wanted to get married? I'm sorry, we kind of cut that story.
No, it's all good.
But there
It's good
are a
conversation.
couple more years in between when you said let's get married at the airport, and now. So like, what was the play? Like, you're 20 years old. Your parents want you. Mom wants you to go to school. Your dad realizes you're going to be you, and what? Like, you don't have a large skill set.
No,
because you're 20.
Yeah.
You got this lady now that you're like agreeing to be responsible for.
Yeah. So, well, we moved. So basically what happened was we decided this in the middle of, it was the middle of the semester. So I moved back here and started going to school in January, right? And we decided to get married, but she couldn't come up right away. So we waited 6 months. We got married in June. And when we got married in June, she loaded up her stuff and came up to University of Idaho with me. The idea was that I was going to go to college to become a teacher and an athletic trainer, a PE teacher and athletic trainer. And so we started doing that. Well, I was not a very good student in high school. Matter of fact, the only thing that kept me going was sports. Like, I was good at football. I played baseball. I loved baseball. I wasn't good at baseball. But that was the only thing that kept me going. So I was going full-time. She was working part-time and taking a couple classes at University of Idaho. And I was flunking half my classes. So I'm like, I'm working. I got a part-time job working at Les Schwab, which I don't know if you've been. I guess they had them in California too. But
Yeah, financial guys.
No. Tire people.
Oh, Les Schwab. Yeah.
Les Schwab, yeah.
No. They do have those. Yes,
Yep.
excuse me. There's
Yep.
a different Schwab.
Charles Schwab.
Charles Schwab.
Yep.
Different Schwab guy.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I was changing.
Both have an LES in them, by the way.
This is true.
You're like, CHA.
I got to think about it. Yeah, but so I was changing tires part-time and I was going to school full-time. Well, then I'm like, all right, I'm going to change tires more than part-time, and I'm going to go to school part-time. And then that turned into, I'm not going to school at all, and I'm working full-time changing tires. And I did that for 11 years. And that was kind of it. And she ended up going back to school. And just as I destroyed my knee and decided that I couldn't work at Les Schwab anymore, I decided I'm going to go back to school. And she graduated from school as a nurse. So we kind of changed roles, and I went back to college.
What happened? Did you drop a snow tire on your knee?
No, I mean, I'm a lot smaller than I used to be. I was like 350 pounds at one point, changing
Holy
tires,
cow.
running on concrete, changing chuck tires, doing all this stuff, and like squatting up and down, because it's a pretty physical job, especially there. Not anymore, because they've sold out and it's not the same. And I feel like cancel culture got a hold of Les Schwab.
Wait, back up. Cancel culture got a hold of the tire company.
I swear,
Like
man.
they've infiltrated everything.
I swear that's what I feel like it felt like it meant. Like, I mean, it was one of those places where it was like, if you worked there, it was like playing baseball for the Yankees. Like, if you think about the Yankees, you can't have facial hair, you can't have long hair, you can't, like, I mean, you're like this clean cut person, your uniform's tucked in, everyone is exactly the same. Blue pants, white shirt, high and tight haircut, no facial hair, run everywhere, greet every customer at the curb. I mean, my job was called sales and service, and that's the way it was. And now it's like, you couldn't even have tattoos, like, showing. So, like, if you had tattoos on your forearms or whatever, you had to wear
Go all the way down.
Yep, that was it. It was tone at the top, and that was the way it was. And if you didn't represent the company by doing those things, which moving into California kind of changed some of those things. There was a lot of things that you would do. Like, I was an assistant manager down in Escalon, California for a while. And it used to be...
Do you want a refill, by the way? I'm such a horrible host.
No, I'm
here.
good right now. I'm
Okay.
good now.
I got more ice if you want that too. Keep going.
I'm good.
Escalon manager.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So anyway, I was assistant manager down there, and they got a lawsuit. Like, everything that happens to any business that is like independent or like in the Northwest, like Les Schwab started in Oregon, and then Idaho, and then Utah, Nevada, Then they moved into California. Anytime you move into California, there's a whole different set of rules. Yeah. And basically the whole company from California up has to turn into the rules of what California is. So, you know, it used to be that you would work a ton of overtime as an assistant manager. You were salary, but you didn't get paid for those overtime hours that you worked. Well, in California, they have a different law where you must be paid for anything, even if your salary, your salary is 8 hours a day, unless it's set in the contract that you signed. Well, there was a guy who got fired down in California who got upset that he was working all these overtime hours, but they fired him because he did something wrong. Well, then he went and found a lawyer, and they did a class action lawsuit, changed the dynamic of the whole company. And so that started making it so that they had to start paying the assistant managers hourly instead of salary, change the contract process, all that stuff. So, I mean, it completely changed. And then they started to having to, like, okay, you get sued because you tell that guy that he has to shave every single day, or you tell that guy you're discriminating because you can't have that, or this guy can't run. So, I mean, there just became all these things.
Yeah, this guy can't run. Well, guess what? Maybe this isn't the job for him. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. But that was the basis of the whole thing. And so the company just started changing a lot. It was a really good company to work for. I mean, I made $60,000 a year. I quit working there. I went back to college. I got my degree in teaching, and I made $38,000 a year.
I was going to say that's you're going to experience a step down.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I appreciate so much about this area. Specifically, it's like here you are, a respectable guy, making money, working a real job, and you're not making astronomical sums of money, but you can buy a normal house, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
Right, $160,000 for 1,600 square feet, and you're making $60,000. It's like, okay, I can see how this all works.
Yeah.
Whereas in California, it's like you're making $100,000. All the houses are $1.5 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck, son.
My brother-in-law is an accountant down in California, and he was making $200,000 a year and couldn't afford a freaking double wide in Fremont,
right,
for $1 million. And it's like, I'm sitting here looking at this house that I'm going to build that's going to be close to $1 million, and I didn't think I'd ever be able to afford something like that. But that's
how big is this house? How many square feet? What are you rocking?
2,800.
You dog! Yeah. Look at you! It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's gonna be really nice. But I've worked, like I've been working really hard for a long time to make that happen. And
right,
I finally found a job that it's all on me. Right, it's 100% commission, so it's all on me. If I don't sell anything, I don't make any money. But I'm willing to bet on myself because I know that I'm good at what I do.
Right. To your point about Les Schwab changing because of the employees. Okay. I just had a conversation. So I have a podcast back in California, and I had a sponsorship with a company, an education company. Know the guys, like the guys. I'm like, hey, it wasn't required that I do it or anything. I just wanted to. I threw their name out there. They weren't actually sponsoring me. I wasn't getting any money from them. But I was like, hey, I like this company. I like these guys. Anyway, so midterms tomorrow, right? Because today's Monday. And at the end of last week, I get a call from the CEO who I've known since I was like 22, right? And I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? I was like, oh, listen, bad situation. So this woman called incensed, right? So she calls and starts screaming at the HR person. Now, mind you, this education company has something like 20 locations. So they're the real deal. And my buddy who built it up, he and his partner built it up from zero. They graduated and literally started building this from, just them to this monstrosity that it is. So he's like, listen, she is threatening a boycott of the company if we don't get our name removed from one of these podcast episodes. I was like, wait, what? Is this person a client? She's like, no, not even a client. So this person calls into this HR department screaming racism and bigotry and all of these things and threatens to boycott the company if they don't change this. And I was like, well, wait, what's the risk to you guys then? He said, look, it's not the boycott. We don't care about the boycott. What we care about is that she is going to get our employees involved in the boycott. And this is exactly what our employees jump onto. Which I was like, wait, what happened? What did I say? He was like, no, nothing really. We actually listened. They listened to the podcast episode. They're like, all right. I was speaking with an educator, a retired educator. She had been in education for 40 years. And she said, look, there are a lot of problems with California education system, and these are them. And she worked with primarily like Spanish-speaking areas, very, very poor areas, and she was in the trenches, right? Like getting kids to learn English in third grade and things like this. So this tremendous career educator that was all in, and she was like, listen, I need to tell you what I saw over the last 40 years. So that's why we did the episode. And I thought it was very well done. I mean, we didn't say anything bad. I mean, here this woman has been helping minorities for the last 40 years learn English. I mean, she's not a bigot. Anyway, so this woman is threatening all this stuff. And I realized that my friend is actually, his company is not really owned by him and his partner. His company is really owned by the employees because they could just bring everything crashing down instantaneously. They could set up these, it's already hard enough to get employees in California, but you got to set up all of these boycotts and strikes and all the stuff. He's like, I have to look. And I was like, hey, no problem at all. I'll take it down. I'll rip the name off. It's just a tag on the end anyway. It's no problem. But it really struck me. It's like, he doesn't own the company. Yeah. He and his partners don't own it. They own it. And even though he's technically the boss, they could just wreck everything. And it doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is that every employee now is an activist for something, right? And if you offend their activist bent, then it could be all over. Yeah,
it's amazing the things that will get you canceled, right? I mean, that's really what it is. It's like you say one wrong thing that someone is offended by, and you offend the wrong person, it could be the end of your whole situation.
Right. What do you think the solution is long term, though? Because I was thinking about this. You're somewhat insulated from cancel culture, right? Like you put yourself out there. You have a podcast, right? But like, what would it take to end Wes? Like, it would take something crazy.
Well, I mean, you think about, I don't know though. I mean, you think about it. Like I've thought about this. Like people that I reach out to interview, I like always try to stay objective with people. I don't want to start talking political with them. I don't want to interject my beliefs in what it is, because I don't think that that's what it's there for. Because but I will tell you this though, even though I don't want that, there are people that have been on my show that do want that want to talk about that. And I just don't want to do that because that's not what it's about. But I don't know. I mean, anything, right? You say one thing that someone doesn't like, and next thing you know, here you are. Like I could talk about my political views. I could talk about I have friends that are African American. My very best friend that I talk to every single day is, and we
Drink Wednesday.
Yep, Jay. We can have a conversation, and he's not going to cancel me.
Right.
He's going to call me out on it, and we're going to talk about it. But the thing is that we can't talk about anything, or all we want to do is talk about all these things that are wrong. And as soon as we stop talking about it, because I mean, like racism's a touchy subject, right? But like, racism is there because all we do is bring it out. All we do is talk about it all the time. And this is this and this is that. When in reality, it's a really small percentage of that going on.
Right.
We just magnify the ones that happen.
Right. I have a very good friend. He grew up in the Oakland area too. And he's like, what the problem is? We have a lack of racists. I was like, what? And his whole play is like, listen, everybody's looking for the racists. Everybody's screaming racism from the mountaintops. But very few people can actually point to a real racist, right? Like, for instance, there's this guy, John, I train with. I train jiu-jitsu with him. And I never asked him, but he's slightly darker skinned, but I'm Mexican and I get darker too. And I'm like, whatever. And so I meet his wife and she's like, oh, John, my husband. I'm like, which one? Like, there are several Johns. She's like, oh, the half black guy. I was like, he's half black? So I see him the next day. I'm like, John, you never told me. I always thought you were Puerto Rican. Like, I didn't know. But it's so funny. It's like, I never worried about John. I never worried about offending people. And John laughed, of course. He doesn't care. And his wife described him as half black. It was like, can you say that? Can you say half black? Like,
exactly. That's like,
it's
I'm
so
sitting here
sensitive
thinking,
and weird.
That's the thing. Like, me just now saying what I said, like I'm sitting there, do I call him African American? Do I call him black? What do I call him?
Right.
What do you say that is okay?
Right. I have African American brothers. Okay. Now listen, because that's an ambiguous term. They're adopted. I have adopted siblings who are black. And the humorous part is one of them, I have darker skin than. Like, you're black, I'm darker than you. He's always like, come on, man, not now. But yeah, again, I think people so desperately want to be part of this solution to this problem that they feel is there. Like racism is a problem. But I don't know any racists. That's the problem. And I think a lot of people don't. And so they start saying like, okay, look, I know racism is a problem because people tell me racism is a problem. Right. And very unfortunately, I think there are, like, I don't know what your friend Jay's experiences were, but like I brought this up with a friend of mine who lives in Washington. He's like, well, do you remember this guy from high school? I'm like, no. He's like, well, in high school. I was like, you mean like 24 years ago? He's like, yeah, 24 years ago, this guy told me that he got pulled over like 5 times at this intersection at this one place. And it's because he was black. I was like, okay, I don't really know how to unpack that, but like, do you have other, besides 24 years ago with the 16-year-old who felt he was getting pulled over because he was black, and he may have been, I don't know if he was, but I was like, do you feel this way about any other experiences in life? And he's like, well, no, that one was pretty much it. So this guy who's unfortunately very much becoming the social justice guy was like grasping at straws to give me examples of racism that he had experienced. Yeah. It's like, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, but I don't know any, and I'm not racist, and maybe I need to hang out on like different crews or something and I'll meet some, but it's ridiculous to think about how aggressively people want to paint individuals as racist. It's like, for what? For what purpose?
It's the same thing with cops, like we were talking about cops earlier. It's like people have this problem with cops and they're always out to get me. They're this and that, they're that, blah, blah, blah. I've sat in a classroom where we've had a police officer come in as a special guest who talked to us about the things that they do when they're on a traffic stop because they're protecting themselves because they could get shot. Well, I was watching a video the other day, and the lady is sitting there with the cop comes up. She's going straight for all her stuff, which is a no-no. Like if you know when you get pulled over, the first thing that you should do is stick your hands on the steering wheel, roll down the window, and just stay right there.
Don't move.
Don't move.
Right.
Because they're afraid that they're going to get hurt. And that's the number one thing. They're afraid they're going to get hurt. So if they're afraid they're going to get hurt, what are they going to do? And they see you rifling through stuff, they think you're going for something. Well, the lady had a gun underneath her jacket. He asked if he could. She said she had one. She told him, I'm going to take it out right now. He's like, no, you're not.
I saw this video. Yes, keep going.
Yeah. It's like, no, please don't. And then she started going up, no, you cannot reach in here. No, you cannot take my gun up. I mean, it's like, okay.
And the conversation was insane. He's like, ma'am, you are telling me you have a firearm and you're reaching for it. I don't know you. You're acting very aggressive. Like he keeps trying to talk her down, and she's like, and just yelling at him the whole time. I was like, oh my God, could you imagine?
But this is the classic example of what you need to teach your kids. I mean, this is the greatest thing about that whole deal was I learned something when I was sitting in there too, because the first thing that I ever do when I get pulled over is I know they want my license and my registration, so I go for it. What are they thinking? I'm trying to hide something. I'm trying to put the gun away. I'm trying to hide my, not me, but I mean, I'm trying to hide my drugs, you know.
Not me in particular.
Not me, but I mean.
I'm talking about a friend.
But that's what they could think though. Like, I mean, they're thinking of all these things that you could be doing that's a threat to them so that they're just trying to protect themselves. That's all it is. Right. But you think that they're coming after you because you're African American, because we're profiling all this stuff that's not even a problem. It's because the way that you acted when you did it, it wasn't who you were. It was because you're doing what I was doing as a white person, reaching for my insurance, trying to find out, no, don't do it. Right. Roll down your window, put your hands on the steering wheel. And when you get pulled over like I did the last time, the cop goes, you're an idiot. You're driving 45 in a school zone. Stop so that I don't have to give you a ticket and you don't kill someone.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And again, it's a difficult thing to flesh out. Like, yes, there's racism.
There is.
But calling racism at every turn is not helping anyone. Yeah. Like, it's not, there's another problem with, what are your thoughts on the affirmative action stuff going on right now? So the Supreme Court, if you're not familiar, the Supreme Court heard arguments last week to end all race-based admissions consideration. And there, amazingly, is a group of Asian American students. Turns out a couple years ago, it came out that Harvard was actually discriminating against Asian Americans. And so they had higher standards if you were an Asian American compared to other ethnic groups. That's it. Like flat out, like full stop. Asians had to do better on all metrics than other people because there were so many Asian American students or just Asian students in general from whatever country that were applying and beating the snot out of everyone. And Harvard tried to defend themselves by saying that they had to take a holistic view at things. It's like, that's exactly what racists say. Like, we had to take a full consideration. Like, we got to look at everything. So the Asian American students, who are very smart, band together and they're like, we're going to sue you. This is insane. Like, you're actually being racist because Asian Americans, unlike Caucasians, are a minority.
Yep.
So it's like you're downgrading one minority in favor of another minority. Anyway, so the Supreme Court heard these arguments and they're like, look, how do we flush this out? They were saying they still need to take it into consideration if it's important enough to write in a college entrance essay. But other people are like, this is just like, if you're considering their race aside from their personal story, like if you have a personal story as a Caucasian or an African American or a Mexican, like I'm Mexican, my dad has a story, I have a story. If you're considering things in a story, that's fine. But if you consider things like, oh, he's Mexican, so it's like, that's just institutionalized racism.
Yeah. I think, that whole deal is a tough one because I think that affirmative action is one of those things that if you look at like the president, for example, okay,
sure.
And I don't care what you think of him, but every other thing that comes out of his mouth is about something that like, okay, I'm going to find a woman to do this. I'm going to find a black woman to do this. I'm going to find
this or that.
Yes. Like, okay, I don't care if you do that, but they better be the best person qualified for the job. So if we go and we put 10 people in a room, no matter what color they are, and we pick one based on what they look like, that's ridiculous because are they the best person for the job? And I think that that's what we're all looking for is the best person for the job, not the person who makes us feel good about who's in there.
Well, I think that was actually an incredible insult to women and African-American people alike because the priority became, I want a black woman. And this is the best black woman.
Right.
He should have said, I want the best person. And by the way, the best person is this brilliant black woman.
Yep.
That's what should have been said.
Exactly.
But again, it was reversed. It was like, your priorities are totally out of whack. It's like, well, this is the best we could find.
Yeah.
It's like, that's terrible.
It may be tough because I don't like that person. I don't like what they stand for. I don't like what they are. But they're doing the best job that there is. Like, I mean, if we could go and we can put 10 people in a room that's dark and we can't pick who they are and we can only do it based on typed out answers or whatever, we're going to find the best person for the job, right? Instead, now we're typecasting the best person for the job is a black woman, is a white businessman, is a whatever, right? And that's not it. Like, I want the best person. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what gender they are. If we can even say gender, I don't care what it is. It's like, I want the best person for the job. That's all there is to it.
Well, I think there is a degree of competence that's starting to come out. So within the business world, businesses are starting to realize they're like, look, we can't have all of these missions. We can't have a mission where we, are advocating for this. We can't have a mission where we're, trying to solve that. We can't have a mission where we do this and have our mission of providing the product or service that is our stated goal and charter and stay in business. They're like, there are too many missions. So we are just going to go blind as far as every mission except this one, which is to stay in business and provide this to a consumer. And they're like, look, we accept all of your individual missions and all of your individual activism. And if you want to be in a company, I was listening to an interview with the CEO. He's like, look, if you want to be in a company that has a mission of providing this product or service and also has this other mission of being an activist in whatever way, he's like, that's fine. This is not that company. We will give you a very nice severance package. We will write you glowing recommendations. We will help you find that company. But you need to know going forward that this is not that company and we are not interested in engaging. And we support you in your either individual efforts after work or before work, whenever, but not here. Like, we need you answering emails about this spoon here because this is the best spoon we can make. And if we don't sell this spoon, and I don't care who's selling it, man, woman, alien, it doesn't matter. This spoon needs to be sold. Yep. And it's too hard already to sell this stupid spoon. I think there is a degree of competence that will come out of that mentality. And there's also there will be, I very much believe, more successful companies that are born from that. And they will hopefully, in the long run, outcompete other people. Like, even if you're chasing 3 different missions, like do this product or service and then do it in these 2 other ways, hopefully the one that just has a narrow focus will be able to do it.
Yeah.
And outcompete the others.
Yeah, and I mean that's the tough part, is getting those people to not have to. The problem is that there's so many people telling people how they have to do something,
right,
that they can't.
Right.
I mean, I think you and I talked about choices. Is like, let's give everyone choices of how they can do things.
Right.
And if you give people too many choices, I deal with this every single day. If I walk in and someone wants a blind that is, well, I want this. And then you're like, okay, well, let me give you a color. You know, what color do you want? Well, I'm thinking I probably want this. Okay, so I pull out 3 colors and say, pick one of those. Okay.
Right.
Well, do you got anything else? I do, but
are you sure you don't like these?
Yeah, let's take one of these that you think is the best, and we'll take 2 of those away, and then we'll add 2 more, because I don't want you to be looking at 5 things and going, well, I'm not sure about that one, or I'm not sure about that one.
Right.
If there was 3 colors that you could pick from, blue, black, and red, you're going to pick one of them.
Right.
But if there's 40 different colors of gray, you're going to have a hard time making a choice.
Or 50 shades, who knows?
Yeah, right.
I always had this, I realized really quickly I couldn't give even 2 options to people. When the merchandise I made for my students, I gave it away for free, so they could have it.
Yeah.
But I realized quickly, if you drop 2 things at the same time, like if I dropped a hoodie that was gray and then one that was black, people would figure out which one they liked more. And then say they liked the black one more and the gray one was like, meh. All of a sudden they'd be like, meh, and nobody wants a gray one. Then they take the gray one only as like a consolation prize or like whatever. I guess if the black one gets dirty, I'll wear the gray one for a day. If I took that gray one and dropped it by itself with nothing else, they had nothing to compare it to. So they're like, oh, I'm happy I have this gray sweater. I'm very pleased with this. And so I could never imagine the number of combinations that you have to offer people and how you deal with that stuff. Like offering 3, saying pick the best one and we'll and then drop the one you like the least out and we'll go from there. But you shouldn't even drop just one. You should drop 2 for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
If this is the best, forget everything else. And then we'll go through this iteration 3 times. And if this one is the best out of all 3 of these iterations, then that's the one that's it. Because you're not going to really find something better.
Right.
Too many different combinations. And then all of a sudden, of course, they're not happy with what happened.
Yep.
They regret not picking that other one that they really liked. And then there was a different style that they liked. And then they should have got the dual battery motor instead of the single battery motor. Like all of these different,
Dude, they always go back. The other thing too is they always go back to their original decision. Like people want to see more options, but they always go back to number 1. That's the funny thing about that, is like they always go back to number 1. I did the same thing. It's funny you're talking about the sweatshirts. I did the same thing with t-shirts. Like I started selling t-shirts. And I'm like, I'm going to offer 2 colors, black and blue, and that's it.
Right.
Hey, do they come in green? Well, they could come in green. So then I entertain that, and now I'm selling green ones. And then next thing you know, well, if you had an orange logo, and I'm like,
right.
Nope, we're not doing this. Right. So I started selling sweatshirts a week ago to help a guy get a set of dentures because his teeth are falling out. I was like, I'm going to donate a certain amount of every single sweatshirt to this guy.
Damn, look at you.
Yeah. And I was like, black. That's it.
Right.
And I have the pink and I have the red logo. So you get one or the other and you get a black sweatshirt. So you decide what color your logo is, but that's it. I'm not getting any more other colors. You're getting black. I've sold more sweatshirts than I sold t-shirts. So
yeah, man,
you give them all these different options. They're going to ask you for another one.
Right. And they that they don't like, and you can't, people want what they want until they actually get it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh. But one of the problems is they're responsible for the decision, right?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I only did gray, grayscale. So I had a bone that was as crazy as I got, and then it was like different shades of gray, the switches, so like two-tone, things like that, black, different ink style, but it was all gray, right? It was like all grayscale. And people were like, well, it would be cool if you did a blue one. I was like, you know what the problem with the blue one is? You don't want to wear blue every day. But you wear a black sweatshirt every day.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it. Because they want it until they get it. And then they're like, this isn't that great.
I did the same thing. I went and I bought a Jordan sweatshirt that was royal blue.
Right.
You know how many times I wore that thing? 0.
Right.
Because it doesn't go with my shoes.
Right. But black goes with everything. You know who taught me that? The Archbishop. So when I was in college, I lived in a seminary. So the rowing coach was friends with this Archbishop, and he had the seminary that was under, enrolled. He only had 3 people, but it was like a 13-person house. So he rented it out to the rowing team. So here there are these, oh man, this was terrible. There were these 3 seminaries there my senior year. All right. And one of the guys was like 24. All right. So young guy trying to become a priest in the Anglican church, which is rather conservative. And he's living in Berkeley, and he's living with a bunch of animals. Like, he's living with a bunch of just meathead rowers. And, like, we'd go out, and you can drink, if you're a priest. The bishop very much enjoyed the wine. And so, this guy would come out with us, because we were, just a couple years younger than him. So he'd come out with us, and, of course, he's hanging out with a bunch of dudes who are, just blowing off all the steam, hanging out with ladies. He's trying to be this priest. And, of course, he makes some bad decisions hanging out with us idiots. And he goes into confession, and he confesses to the bishop what he has done. And he's like, I got to get this off my chest. I did this. I did this. I did this. The bishop's like, okay, thank you, Steve. Like, Steve goes, I can't remember his name, but it was like, whatever. So Steve goes away. And then like a month later, the bishop kicks him out of the seminary. I was like, why did you kick him out? He's like, oh, Steve was making some bad decisions. I was like, didn't he confess that to you? You're not supposed to be able to tell anyone. And so the bishop took his confession and held it against him. Yeah. I was like, Steve, you confessed to your boss. You should have found a different dude to confess to. Like, but he got kicked out.
You should have confessed to me.
Right. I was like, Bish, you can't do that to Steve. And he's like, he's very confused about what he wants in the world. I was like, God, man. Anyway, listen, I don't know how long we've been going, but it's got to be late. And you got like a 10-month-old at home. It's already 6:30. I got to let you go. Wes, thank you for coming, man. What a pleasure talking to you.
Man, I'll tell you what. If I can do it again, I will, because I love this. I just love sitting here having a good conversation and drinking a good glass of bourbon and just,
Look at you, man.
Yeah.
Will you explain to me the last thing here? What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? Bourbon's made in America, right? And like whiskey's made in Scotland? That's the distinction?
There's a lot more to it than that, because bourbon is actually whiskey. It's the way that it's made.
This is going to have to be our next conversation. Yeah, I feel like we're going to go down a rabbit hole.
Scotch is made a different way too. So Scotch whiskey is different as well.
Okay, what's single malt Scotch? Like, what does that mean?
That part I don't know, but I will.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know that part, but okay. I do know that Scotch. So short story. Okay. I'll try and make it short.
No, so it's good. I got all the time. I just don't want to take your family time away.
Yep. Bourbon is made in a oak charred barrel. And aged at least 5 years. Okay. Tennessee whiskey is charcoal filtered, so when they pour it out of the barrel, it gets filtered through charcoal. Scotch is made in a similar way, but it doesn't have to be in an oak charred barrel. They actually put it in like used wine barrels sometimes, or they'll put it like it's a different like. There's a couple documentaries you should check out on. They're on net. There's
apparently
one. Yeah, they're kind of cool. I know just enough to get in trouble, but I like bourbon.
I have a buddy who, Ryan, my buddy Ryan, who owns the lab company that I do the stupid cartoons for. Uh-huh. He, one of the first ideas he had that he was trying to sell me, and he's like, dude, we need to make our own distillery. I'm like, I don't drink nearly enough or have nearly enough time to get into this. Oh, it was 100%. He's like, no, listen, bro, I owe like 10% of a distillery already. We could do it. We'll call it like the Dry Creek Distillery. And it's going to be great. He's like, and then what we'll do is we'll build a pizza place over in the commercial area that's waiting to be developed. We'll have only pizza and whiskey. It'll be amazing. I was like, you are insane, bro. But
it will be amazing.
Yeah, it will be amazing. Anyway, thanks for coming, buddy. I appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate it.
Quick shout out to our sponsor, C Squared Social. C Squared Social is the leading expert in social media marketing and creative marketing. They have fantastic platforms. I have been a client of theirs for some time. I cannot recommend them highly enough. C Squared Social for all of your social media and creative marketing needs.